Round of applause for SM Cares, please. SM Cares has been partners with different organizations and government institutions in the country. As today, we have with us one of SM Cares' institutional partners when it comes to their various CSR programs, especially for the women and youth. To give us a special message, we are very honored to have with us UNICEF Philippines Country Representative, Ms. Lota Silwander.
Children who are here and children with disabilities and people living with disabilities. You might ask, why is it important to protect and think about young people with disabilities in a disaster situation? And we would say from UNICEF that because typically in every emergency, between 50 to 60% of those who are most affected are children. And it affects them in a way that, well, the same way it affects everyone, but even more so. They're losing their lives because they can't get away. They get malnourished during a protracted emergency. They get unhealthy or sick from poor water and sanitation conditions. And they also are unable to access schooling or other supports, and psychosocial stress is usually a very serious factor for young people with disabilities that are part of an emergency situation. In the Philippines, it's estimated that about 1 out of 7 children, or 5.1 million Filipino children, are living with some kind of disability. These are children who are hearing impaired, visually impaired, mobility impaired, developmentally disabled, and so on. And of course, they all have different needs, and they all need different support in an emergency situation. About 1.5 million children in the Philippines need some kind of assistive device, like hearing or vision aids or a prosthesis, to be able to go about daily life. But only about 5% of those 1.5 million children have access to some kind of aid. Disability in the Philippines really subjects the person with disability to a vicious cycle of deprivation. Children with disabilities are usually the most vulnerable during the times of disaster and emergency, and even when there's not an emergency or a disaster. Their vulnerabilities as children are worsened by the different disabilities that they experience. For example, mobility. They can't get away when there is an earthquake, for example. They may also have additional impairments due to the lack of limited resources and limited understanding of what they need and what special needs they have. In addition, children with disabilities are most often not included in the disaster risk deduction planning and decision-making process. However, there is a window of opportunity to significantly reduce these deprivations. The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, through the Office of Civil Defense, endorsed Lahat Handa, an inclusive community-based disaster risk reduction and management training manual, and I'm not even going to pretend to say the abbreviation, under the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council. This manual integrates inclusive approaches to community-based DRMM, and promotes the rights and capacities of children, of youth, of older people, and of persons with disabilities. And this is definitely a step in the right direction. But we need to do more. We need more data. We want data that is accurate and disaggregated to tell us what kind of disabilities children or people living with disabilities have. And we want to know what interventions are necessary for them. We also need a strong, integrated, community-based intervention that will ensure community sensitization, prevention, early detection, and interventions, and of course referrals of those who have some kind of disability. We also need to ensure that DRRM policies and programs are more inclusive to the needs of children with disabilities and other vulnerable groups. We also need to ensure and equip facilities to be able to deliver services and to deliver to contract services such as PhilHealth for disability packages for children. We also need to retrofit existing buildings and infrastructure to address the accessibility needs of children with disabilities. In the video that we first saw, I was actually looking for the disability exit. How does a person in a wheelchair get down the stairs when they're not allowed to take the elevator, for example? So still a bit to do there. We also need strong referral loop or systems from community up to the higher level facilities and back to the community for a continuity of care across sectors. We also need to invest in building the capacities of people with disabilities and their families, their carers, their personal assistants, and their communities, so that they understand how to be inclusive and how to work with persons with disabilities in a disaster risk reduction management situation. We also must ensure that there is a Persons with Disability Affairs office in every municipality that can ensure the support to people with disabilities, but in particular to children with disabilities. So let me tell you a bit of what UNICEF has done so far. We have been working with PhilHealth to develop children with disability benefit packages for children aged 0 to 17, with 4 major categories of disabilities, namely mobility, so an assessment, assistive devices, wheelchair, prosthesis, rehabilitation, and so on. Secondly, developmental assistance, so again, assessment and rehabilitation. Vision, assessment, assistive devices, but also make sure that the child has glasses and a cane, etc. And then lastly, hearing. Again, an assessment and devices like hearing aids and speech therapy for those with severe hearing disabilities. So to date, all of the 4 packages have already been approved, and they're waiting for hospitals to be contacted. Once the hospitals have been contacted, children with disabilities will be able to access services for free. To complement this, it was also necessary to address physical inaccessibility by supporting facilities that can offer appropriate services. These facilities, or CWDs, hubs, or children with disability hubs, are just meant to kickstart the provision of these services and be eventually scaled up by government. So to date, we have developed 3 so-called hubs for children with disabilities, and one in Luzon, one in Visayas, and one in Mindanao. And there's also a plan to open another one in northern Luzon, in Baguio, still subject to funding. So in closing, I would like to thank you, the children and adults and young people who are here today, and of course government representatives and NGO partners. And of course thanking SM Supermalls through SM Cares for creating the opportunities for children with disabilities. And for UNICEF, children and young people's rights are really at the heart of our mission. And that's why we encourage all sectors to involve young people in all levels of planning and decision making. You are part of the solution and your voices need to be heard. Mabuhay kayo. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lota. Ms. Lota, may I please invite you